The following speaker is an outspoken conservative activist and is the chairman of the Coventry Republican Town Committee, a member of the CTRA, NRA, CCDL, and holds a bachelor's in business economics and finance from the University of Connecticut. He is running for town council this year in his hometown. He and his wife recently welcomed their first child, Nathaniel, who was born just a short time ago on June 29th. He is a successful financial advisor and is the co-founder of TPAC 2020, a federal super PAC dedicated to the re-election, despite what they want to do, of President Donald J. Trump. He is a strong conservative, constitutional advocate, and has been intimately involved with Connecticut politics on the state and local level. Most recently, he ran for chairman of the Connecticut Republican Party and received excellent grassroots support. And let me just say, when you're receiving grassroots support from people that you live with and that you talk to, that's the best way. Remember, a government closest to the people is the best government, as Mark just had cited Thomas Jefferson. Always a good person to cite. As a conservative activist, he has worked hard to help Republicans across the state become elected and roll back the damaging tax increases, regulatory oppression, and economic slowdown caused by Democrat policy. He believes that the Connecticut Republican Party should seek a high level of activity and begin to educate and inspire the political leaders of tomorrow. Patriots, please join me in welcoming Matt O'Brien.
Thank you very much. This is a beautiful venue. I'm so glad we could all be here today. I like that sign over there. The left cares about their party. The right cares about our country. It says it all right there. Yeah, please. Good afternoon, Patriots. 243 years ago, 13 small British colonies boldly stood together with one voice and declared that they would no longer be subjects to anyone. They would oppose in war the greatest global superpower the world had ever known. And they would form a new nation with an important and radical central belief that all men are created equal, and because of that, no person would rule over any other. The people themselves would be free to pursue absolutely any path that they would choose for their lives. And they would be the masters of their own government, their own destiny. Since 1775, 1,354,000 Americans have given their lives in defense of American sovereignty, American exceptionalism, and America's right to exist in freedom. At times, the price for that freedom has been high. But we've never been unwilling to pay that price. America is a miracle. If we look to the answer as to why for so many years we have prospered as no other people on earth, it was because here in this land we unleashed the energy and individual genius of man to a greater extent than has ever been done before. Freedom and the dignity of the individual have been more available and ensured here than on any other place on earth. That's Ronald Reagan. The right will never accept socialism. And the left will accept nothing less. Be prepared. Those on the left will never allow a Trump victory, even should we win the popular vote and the Electoral College. The left will go absolutely insane, deploying every insurance policy weapon at their disposal to undermine the president. Antifa, the military arm of the Democrat Party, has not spent the last 3 years practicing and organizing merely to sit on the sidelines. They have used the time to mobilize and learn tactics while probing to find out what government will allow, media will trumpet, and the public will endure. The skirling resistance has morphed from pajama boy blobs of perpetually offended little dictators and pussy hat sporting screamers into balaclava wearing Avengers who crave the opportunity to put deplorables in their place and give you the government they think you deserve, good and hard. They will flood the streets after a Trump victory in their Antifa costumes, looking to bust the heads of anyone near enough to become part of their 15 minutes of YouTube fame. Be prepared. Riots will begin in liberal cities, including in Connecticut, where political leadership will provide them a measure of protection against identification and arrest. Antifa will be called the new founding fathers by the media. Blood will be spilled. China, Iran, Russia, and Venezuela will plead for calm and offer to mediate the ever-evolving humanitarian crisis. Be prepared. Should Trump not be re-elected, the new president will issue executive orders throwing open our borders, banning fossil fuels, and of course implementing common sense gun control. They will start with universal background checks and a gun registry. Eventually, the new president will overreach, signing an executive order of gun confiscation, euphemistically called mandatory buybacks. I don't remember ever buying my guns from the government. Antifa will be tasked with flooding the streets in support of seizing these weapons of war. Media will declare it's the will of the people. For the right, that will be the last straw. We will not allow America to go quietly into the night. For once Obama will have been proven correct. Americans do cling to their guns. Be prepared. We face a new kind of enemy today. Everything we value is under attack. This new generation of Democrats seek a socialist nation, a nation that desires to take our homes, jobs, health, rights, families, and liberties, and make us wards of the state, casting us into shells of our former selves, irrelevant participants in our own lives. And it is then that we will lose our freedom. I'm not willing to lose any more freedom. We must realize that no arsenal or weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon that our adversaries, both abroad and here at home, do not have and cannot understand. It is a weapon that we as American patriots do have. How do we fight back? Today we're graced with living under ROL, or rule of law. Our system, however dysfunctional and sometimes corrupt, is still working, thank God. In Connecticut, we must continue to find leaders to run for office who are willing to put their name on the line at risk of being humiliated, scorned, ridiculed, for those among us unable to speak for themselves. Where are the future leaders of Connecticut? Because we need you to step forward now. We're suffocating. This is what it feels like to lose freedom. I'll summarize our common purpose here today. It is the very same purpose that our founders had 243 years ago. Freedom from government and American sovereignty. We have every right to have a nation, uphold the Constitution, defend our borders from foreign invasion, speak freely our opinions without fear, live in peace, reject globalism, and exercise our unalienable right to bear arms and defend our families. We will never surrender. We again find ourselves at a defining moment in history. And again, we're called to step forward and defend America. But this time from the unrelenting threat of radical liberalism, an ideology that seeks to centralize power and rule over the entire world, that not only hates that we are free, but seeks to annihilate all freedom. I strongly urge everyone to help those good people running for office, especially in your towns right now. Municipal elections are in November. the people that share our desire to preserve the freedoms that we cherish and to restrict government in every way possible. Look around you. These are your brothers and sisters who will be with you through whatever is coming. It's our time and our turn to act. You are all here today because you've heard that calling. You know what's at stake. Work relentlessly and never, ever give up. God bless you.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Matt O'Brien. In our battle to save our country, it is important to remember why we are who we are and why we believe what we believe. It's important to remember that we are not just conservatives or just Republicans. We're not just voters on the right. We're more than that. We cherish liberty. We cherish our freedoms. We cherish the ability to speak freely and assemble. We cherish the ideas that not only built this country, but held it together for so long. We do not take for granted our right to bear arms. We do not take for granted our right to privacy. We do not take for granted as a country our right to national sovereignty. In a few short moments, you'll be hearing from someone who has had these values instilled within him since the first time he voted. At age 18, he registered as a Republican. He believes that limited government, personal responsibility, and the need for fiscal responsibility with regards to government spending are invaluable. He is an avid supporter of individual liberty and the Constitution, as well as the Second Amendment. He is a member of the NRA, which the liberals like to call a terrorist organization. By the way, the NRA is responsible for 0 mass shootings. He is a gun owner and is active in the sport. His unyielding defense of constitutional principles thrusts him into the public eye, becoming widely recognized in the state of Connecticut. Please join me in welcoming the 2012 Connecticut Citizens Defense League Legislator of the Year and 2014 NRA Defender of Freedom Award winner, your state senator, Rob Sampson.
Good afternoon, everyone. That was a damn good bio. I actually had a bio that I wrote and I was going to include, but I'm not going to top that. So I will just leave it there and say a couple of words. People who know me in the legislature know that I'm probably the most loquacious or talkative person that serves in the General Assembly. And that's because I can't manage to keep my mouth shut when people are trying to do terrible things to my constituents. I've been involved in many a scrape, many a pitched battle in the Connecticut General Assembly, including that battle over the massive gun control bill that was passed in the wake of that terrible tragedy in Sandy Hook. Since then, there's been countless other issues, from budgets to illegal immigration, you name it. But I've done my best to try and stand for liberty and for the principles that made this country great. I founded the Conservative Caucus back in 2014. But today, my focus, more than anything, is to teach as many people as I can, my friends, my neighbors, and people that I meet on the street, what it means to be an American. Because I think more than anything, that is what is at stake and what we are losing. We are all here today because I think we all recognize that it is more important now than ever to be defenders of the U.S. Constitution. So I'm going to cover some territory that was already covered by the previous speakers. But I want to put it in a little bit different context. I'm going to try and give you tools to take away from today to help teach people how to be Americans, why it's important, and the value of it. So it was already mentioned that the Constitution was written to replace the Articles of Confederation and to more firmly establish the United States as a nation. And also in keeping with the principles contained in our original founding document, the Declaration of Independence. And finally, to establish and guarantee that America is a country for free people. More specifically, the Bill of Rights is that guarantee. And you should explain it to every person that you come in contact with when you meet them and you are discussing the concept of being an American, that the Bill of Rights is not rules for the people. It is rules for the government, effectively restricting the government from interfering with the natural rights that we are all born with. It was also mentioned that we, America, our constitutional principles are under assault, and they have been for some time. But I think we are at a serious crossroads, ladies and gentlemen. It is so critically important for us to understand our history and the principles contained in the Declaration of Independence and how the Constitution establishes our system of laws in keeping with those principles. So I know this is a constitutional awareness rally, but I knew a lot of people would talk specifically about the Constitution. So I want to talk about the Declaration of Independence, because we cannot understand our Constitution or the Bill of Rights unless we understand the Declaration. And luckily, the founders, they wrote it all down for us. I don't want to go into a whole history of the American Revolution, but I think everyone here knows that the Declaration of Independence is exactly that. It's a document that explains to the entire world, a candid world it was mentioned, that the colonies were separating from England because of the bad acts and deeds of the terrible King George. And you can read through the Declaration of Independence and you can see all the individual itemized grievances the colonists had and why they were driven to the ends that they were. And the situation was obviously very dire, since those brave souls who signed the Declaration were undoubtedly certain to face a terrible fate if they were captured by the British. It's worth looking up, by the way. There were 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence. 5 of them were tortured by the British before they died. A total of 9 died during the Revolutionary War. 11 had their homes ransacked or burned, and others lost their children. Who here knows how the Declaration of Independence ends? Anyone? We mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. These are mostly men of a decent and fortunate means, and they led good lives. So why did they do it? Possibly it was because they were intelligent and educated men who had studied history and knew there was an opportunity for a better way. And I like to think that they did it for us, the people that would come later in America. So before I get any more misty-eyed about our founders, which I am definitely prone to do, I'm going to try and get to the point of my remarks today, which is to share 3 valuable principles we should all know and be prepared to teach and explain to help educate our neighbors. The first one, and of course the wind is not cooperating with my notes, is the idea of created equal. So we've heard it a couple times today. We hold these truths to be self-evident. That kind of means obvious, not exactly, but for our purposes I think obvious is good enough. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So what does created equal mean? Are we equal? I don't think so. There's all kinds of people here today. Some shorter, taller, more wealthy, smarter. So of course not. So was Thomas Jefferson an idiot? I don't think so. So what did he mean? And what does that sentence mean in our most precious founding document that lays out what our country is going to be about? It lays out the premise of human equity, that we all have equal individual natural rights that are not based on what groups we belong to. And I'm going to go back to that in a few minutes, so please remember it. It's based on the notion that we are born with natural rights and not what group we are in. It also means that we're born equal in the eyes of the law. It also means that our minds, our bodies, and our labor, the effort that we put in, all belong to us as individuals and not to our government. It's a whole separate issue, and maybe if I come to another one of these things I can talk about it more. But it's interesting to note that Abraham Lincoln brought this same set of words up during the Gettysburg Address. 407 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now, we all know those on the left that are determined to undermine our founders. But here's an example where on the exact issue of slavery, Lincoln chose to reference the words that began our country. So the second principle is limited self-government. The very idea that government is responsible and accountable to the people themselves. It says right in the Declaration that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And of course it goes on to say that the people have the right to alter or abolish that government if it doesn't meet those ends. So I just said it, so I hope someone was listening. What is the purpose of government? That's right, to secure our natural rights. To secure these rights, it also says the government requires the consent of the governed, which basically means that no person has authority over another. And incidentally, that extends to another very important principle, that no one has the right to the wealth or work of another person. And finally, no one is exempt from our laws. Under the Constitution, we have the rule of law. And the final principle I want you guys to walk away with today is the notion of capitalism. Capitalism, Ron? That's not in the Declaration. That's not in the Constitution. Yes, it is. What is capitalism? I have a friend that refers to capitalism as the only moral socio-economic system devised by man. And I think he's right. And people are going to argue with this, but I believe capitalism is established in our founding documents. The definition of capitalism is where a free people, pursuing their own individual happiness and pursuits, use their ability to produce, whether it's products or services, so they can exchange with others, also doing the same thing, producing for the purpose, all for the purpose of improving their own lives. The result is a moral system where no one gets to take the work of another. It benefits hard work and leads to unparalleled prosperity. I always say that the greatest period of prosperity in human history was the first 150 years of America. And you can look around and think about all the things that were invented at that time here in this place. From the telephone to the radio to the automobile, indoor plumbing, you could go on and on. And it is because we had capitalism as part of our country. So again, why is it so important today to be defenders of the Constitution? And it's because, yes, these uniquely American principles have been under assault. Everyone knows how divided our country is, and we may in fact be at the crossroads that Ben Franklin described about whether we're going to keep our republic. So it's important to understand why our founding principles are under assault and by whom. I don't know, the paper blew away. Just kidding. The short answer, forces within who have now taken over one of our major political parties, the Democrats. I want to say something really quick, by the way. If there are any Democrats here today or Democrats watching this, I want you to know that I'm not talking about any individual person. I'm talking about the party itself. And I have a favor to ask you, which is to get a hold of your political party and tell them that they need to go back to being Americans, because the leadership of the Democrat Party has long since left the notion of America. And it's sad because it wasn't always this way. Historically, both parties, Democrats and Republicans, were much closer together. And they agreed on basic American ideas and principles. You know, of course, they disagreed and spent their time on disputes over how much government involvement there should be, the size of the safety net, how we're going to handle our foreign relations. But there was always at least a focus on legitimate public policy and a respect for American values. Unfortunately today, that concept, the idea of focusing on legitimate public policy, is just simply inconsistent with the modern Democratic Party business model. Socialism, for lack of a better word. or at least big government redistributing wealth and policy via identity politics and an effort to discourage individual freedom in exchange for temporary safety and security. It's a polite form of slavery induced by ignorance and apathy. And sadly, it's the fruits of labor and of capitalism that have created the comfortable environment that we live in that is allowing it to happen. Their goal today is to rig the game to win elections and ultimately complete power and control. And that is why we see our constitutional principles being eroded every day. Just a couple of examples. The First Amendment. Myself and State Senator Joe Markley have been fighting with the state government, the State Elections Enforcement Commission, about what we are allowed to put in our campaign mailers. Can you believe it? It's political speech, the most protected type of speech that there is. The Second Amendment. I don't even need to come up with an example. Not a day goes by that there is not some threat to the Second Amendment. Lately, more and more attacks have been on due process, the Fourth Amendment, the Kavanaugh hearings. Mark mentioned the red flag laws. The whole concept of innocent until proven guilty is at stake in this country. And we cannot lose any of these protections. Today, the Democrat Party's method for maintaining power is in direct contradiction to and inconsistent with American principles. A tactic that they like to use is to highlight an unpopular set of circumstances to convince people that their rights aren't really that important. And I'm going to give you some examples. And this is for us to watch out for, so we know when to interject and say, you should know why we have these principles. First one, when it comes to political speech, a lot of people will say, well, wouldn't it be better to have rules about campaign ads to prevent the nastiness and the personal attacks? On firearms, on the Second Amendment, they would say, wouldn't we all be safer if there were more rules for people to obtain guns? Or even better if we could just get rid of all guns together. On the issue of due process, they will say, how could we take a chance that that accused person may commit another heinous act, whether they committed the one in question or not? And sadly, these questions often receive a favorable response. And that's because they elicit strong emotions from people, despite how dangerous they are to the rights of individuals. The modern Democratic Party is pursuing the absolute authority of the government power and a willingness to discard the rights of individuals in favor of various constituency groups that can be manipulated by government benefits or by developing policies, and you can name the groups. I mean, it's, used to be simply class warfare, but now it is race, it is sexual orientation, it is town by town. You name it, they will put you into a category or a group and pit you against your neighbors. It is this identity politics that is tearing at the fabric of our nation. And it's also making it very hard to survive as a Republican in a world where the public has largely forgotten the value of freedom. So what can we do to preserve our republic? I think the Republican Party is still the only viable choice, and that's why I've chosen to run for office as a Republican. And partly because as long as I'm there, I have the ability to influence what the Republican Party stands for. But I know they're imperfect, and not counting the mistakes that some make willfully. We don't have candidates in the city sometimes, and there's always a lack of resources to reach the whole segments of the population. So that means it's up to us, the people that are here today, to teach other people, regular Americans like us, to teach other regular Americans the principles that we've just discussed. So please, take that with you. Teach everyone you know the principles that we just talked about. Teach them that our founding documents are not racist, that they establish that all men are equal in the eyes of the law. Teach them that the answer to almost every policy problem is to shrink government and let the free market work. Teach them about the importance and value of capitalism, which is the other integral part of our greatness. Teach them that mob rule is dangerous and the things we need to protect are the unpopular things. And finally, teach them that These are the reasons why we live in the greatest country on earth, and that none of us should ever take it for granted. Thank you all for being here today and standing with me in defense of our nation and for the principles that we all love and believe in. God bless America.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up one more time for your state Senator Rob Sampson.
Yeah.